Joshua Becker, so excited to finally get a chance to actually sit down, speak with you today about your story, your faith journey. I had a chance, I actually found out about you and started following you several years ago after I briefly saw you in a very popular documentary on Netflix, which I still think is on Netflix and people need to see it if they have not. Because that's kind of where it got my wheels turning. I think about all this minimalism, the lifestyle. And again, that's kind of where I knew something was different about you, though, that I could tell you were a Christian as well. And let's start there because your story is fascinating. You started out as a pastor, and I don't think you really necessarily envisioned this is what you would also be telling people about. So tell us, let's start there, Joshua.
Sure. I was a pastor for 15 years at churches in Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Vermont. I loved pastoring. My grandpa was a pastor. My grandpa always used to say, if God called you into the ministry, don't stoop to be a king. And I felt called into that, and I loved doing it. I loved helping students, and then I worked as an associate pastor at a church plant here in Phoenix. But about 14 years ago, I was introduced to minimalism by my neighbor it was a pretty typical Saturday morning. We were doing our spring cleaning. I was cleaning out the garage. My son was 5. And my garage project ended up taking hours and hours, just tidying up after the winter in Vermont. And my son was alone in the backyard, playing by himself, asking me to come play catch. And I just kept pushing him off as I worked on the garage. I happened to strike up a conversation with my neighbor. I was complaining a little bit about how long my garage project was taking. And she introduced me to minimalism. She said, "That's why my daughter's a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own all this stuff." And I looked at the pile of things in my driveway I'd spent all morning taking care of. Out of the corner of my eye, there was my 5-year-old son swinging alone on the swing set in the backyard, and suddenly had this realization that not only were my things not making me happy, which I think all of us would say, we're not looking for happiness in our possessions, but in that moment, I could see how all of my possessions were actually keeping me from the very thing that did bring me happiness and meaning and joy and purpose in life. So that began my journey into minimalism, which eventually became what I think is my new calling in life.
It's needed, that's for sure. I'm a mom. I have 3 kiddos myself. My youngest is 3, and then I have a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I get it. I feel like I live that daily struggle. I think so many families and parents do. Talk about, there was a verse in particular that I think you kind of shared with me that really kind of drove you from, the discipleship, and then also what that means when we kind of declutter and really, from what I can tell, that you're trying to say, alleviate our mind and what we do here on earth on those earthly things. They just get in the way of other things. Talk about that verse and why that really kind of changed your course.
Yeah. Let me even give you a backstory to the verse that I really want to share. But it was interesting to me as I found minimalism and began owning fewer things and suddenly noticed, hey, the less I own, the more time I have, the more money I have, the more energy and focus and peace, and able to spend more time with my kids. And it was interesting, all the very practical benefits that came into our lives and into our family when we started intentionally owning fewer things. And I remember turning to Kim one time as we were decluttering one of the bathrooms and just talking about this change that we were making. And I said, "Where's this been my whole life? Like, how come no one told me about minimalism before and all the benefits that it would bring into my life?" And I stopped myself like mid-paragraph because it occurred to me that my neighbor wasn't the first person to tell me about minimalism, but Jesus was saying the exact same thing 2000 years ago. Like, he was telling us life is not found in the abundance of possessions. And like, his specific instructions to the rich young ruler were, get rid of your possessions and come follow me, and you'll have treasures in heaven. And what was interesting to me is that I always used to think of everything that Jesus said about money and possessions as like this great sacrifice that I would have to give up all this stuff, and maybe I would have treasures in heaven, but man, my life on earth is sure going to be boring if I get rid of all this stuff in my life, until I started actually doing it and realizing, hey, wait a minute, he was right. Like, he was just inviting us to a better way to live than the way the world is living around us. So it was, that was my first, like, really noticing how minimalism began to reshape what Jesus taught us and what Jesus invited us to. And man, there's a pretty famous parable in Luke chapter 8, the parable of the four soils. And most people will be familiar with it. The first soil burns up, doesn't grow at all. The second one doesn't grow roots. The third soil grows roots but doesn't bear any fruit. And then the fourth one is really the fruitful soil. And it's one of the few parables that Jesus actually explains. And when he explains the third soil, he says they have faith and they grow roots, but their fruit is choked out by riches, pleasures, and worries. And I was telling a friend that one time about that verse. Riches, worries, and pleasures are what choke out the fruitfulness of our faith. And he said, well, isn't it? It must be the love of riches. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good point. It probably is the love of riches. And I opened up the passage, and it's not. Like, in some ways, just the mere the things that we have around us, the possessions, and maybe sometimes even the money, and all the worries that come along with it, begin to choke out our fruitfulness. So anyway, that's a long answer. I probably shouldn't be answering these questions so long, but I spent my whole life thanking God I was the fourth soil, and suddenly realized, you know what, maybe most of the American church is actually the third soil, and could do for some more fruitfulness.
It's funny that you said the American church, because literally as you're saying that, and I guess it can't hold true because obviously America was not born when Jesus was talking, but I do think we here in America, we are just a different culture. And I think so much more consumed with things and advertisements. And you don't know what you don't know. So I feel like our kids are growing up in this new age, and they're following their parents. I mean, this is just kind of the path that we have set out. And unfortunately, it's just speeding up and getting faster with the more that we need to consume.
Yeah. Statistically, we see 5,000 advertisements every single day. And I think what happens is, like, these advertisements are very good, and they all have the same message. The same message of every advertisement is, your life will be better if you buy whatever we're selling. And I don't think we ever intentionally set out to buy a whole bunch of stuff that we don't need. Like, I don't think anyone ever says, my greatest goal in life is to just have as much clutter in my home, or just have as much stuff in my home. I don't even think, if you sit across the table from somebody and say, what's your greatest desire in life, I don't even think most people say, I want as much money as I can, or I want as much land, I want as big a house as I can. But marketers move us in that direction. The world is moving in that direction. Society makes that the goal of all of our lives, and we very unintentionally buy into it, until I think someone comes along, like my neighbor, or you stumbling across that documentary, or someone happens to be watching this right now and thinks to themselves, you know what, you're right. I have more stuff than I need, and it is taking up time and it is a chore to have to organize and manage all this stuff. And maybe there is more freedom in my life to pursue my passions if I were to own less. And it's absolutely true.
So you've now worked with, I mean, I would imagine thousands of people and helping them, if not even more, kind of help embark on this journey. Because when you first look at it and try to take that step one of trying to rid ourselves of so much stuff, it seems so overwhelming that I mean, it just seems paralyzing to say, I'm never going to get there. Why even start? What is your advice to really beginning this journey? Because again, it just seems so overwhelming.
Yeah. Man, that's a great question. And you preface it so well. Like it can be overwhelming and it is overwhelming. And a lot of times our minds race to like the hardest part of our home or the hardest part of our life that we would ever have to declutter or minimize. And so we think, yeah, I've really got to go through the attic. I really got to go through the garage. Oh, how am I ever going to go through my sentimental items? Or I've got these boxes of photos that I need to go through. But in reality, there are a lot easier places for people to get started. And I think if you start in easier places, find some of the low hanging fruit and start to make changes in this direction, then the harder things become easier to handle when you get there. And so, honestly, sometimes I think the best advice for somebody is to just go declutter your car. Like, just go take everything out of your car that doesn't need to be there. And it won't take that long. And the next time you sit in your car to drive somewhere, it'll feel more calm and it'll feel more peaceful. It'll feel cleaner. You'll like being in that environment more than when there was a plastic water bottle, rolling around in the back seat or whatever it is. And you'll think to yourself, where else can I have this feeling? Like, where else can I make this change in my life? And then my approach is easiest to hardest, starting in your most lived in areas. So go declutter your living room or your bedroom or a bathroom, and then save the garage for later, save the attic for later, save the photos for later. Like, just find easier spaces to start making changes.
Okay, that seems manageable. I like it.
Yeah, good.
I'm curious, has there been anything, because obviously you went from being a pastor, at a church, and then now you're living this lifestyle. What has this lifestyle taught you about Jesus, and has it helped you along with your walk with God, or having more time to be able to study His? I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of assuming that might be, effect from it. But what do you think this has taught you about your faith journey at this point? Because it's obviously very different than your story was, 15 years ago.
Yeah, man, so much, so much. John the Baptist comes to prepare the way for Jesus, and he's out in the desert, and the Israelites finally buy in to what he's saying, and so they go out, they meet him in the desert, and they say, "Okay, the Messiah's coming. What do we have to do to get ready?" And John says, if anyone who has two tunics, get rid of your extra. Anyone who has extra food, give it to the poor. Be content with the money that you have. Don't extort money. Don't extort people falsely. This is how he tells people to get ready for Jesus to come. It all had to do with possessions and money and getting rid of the things that we don't need. And as I began owning less, it felt great to take things to Goodwill and free up space in my home. But man, there came a point where like I really had to wrestle with, why did I have boxes and boxes of stuff in my home that I didn't need? Why do I buy stuff that I don't need? Why do I worry about not having enough money or think that I always need to keep buying things whenever I see them on sale? Like I'm going to run out of stuff. And um, man, when I started like really wrestling with what are my motivations for keeping all this stuff and for buying all this stuff in the first place, I didn't really like what I found. Like it, and a lot of times it was jealousy or it was greed or it was trying to impress other people or it was I'd fallen prey to the world's messaging. Like maybe I really was looking for happiness in the things that I owned. And uh, I I found that my heart was a little more tied to the world than I
Mm,
ever would have admitted. And I don't think we begin to recognize that until we start taking these steps and start wrestling with why do I have all this stuff? Why is this so hard for me to get rid of things? I think anything we learn in that direction opens us up to receive more of Jesus and open ourselves up to have more of God in our lives, and as well as just freeing up time and money and energy to follow Him and to accomplish the work that He's called us to do for His kingdom.
ah, I love it. You're inspiring me this morning. I'm ready to go clean and go toss out stuff. Hey, I wanted you to give an opportunity. We were talking too about the hope effect, and I know this has been kind of another side project of your family's, which is important to mention as well. Bring that up and kind of share that journey if you can as well.
Uh, Man, a great question and a great follow up from the last one because the Hope Effect is a nonprofit that my wife and I started back in 2015. Um, as I started writing about minimalism, I started a blog called Becoming Minimalist, and a lot of people were drawn to the message, and the blog began to grow, and people seemed to like my writing, and so eventually, I had a couple different publishers who wanted to publish a book on minimalism and offered me more money than I thought anyone would offer me to write a book. And it was interesting because my wife and I sat down on the couch and I said, like, do we really believe everything that we've been saying? Like, we're about to get a nice paycheck for writing this book. Do we just want to go buy a bigger house? Do we just want to go replace the cars or get a bigger screen television? Like, is that what we're going to do to go write a book about how money won't make you happy and then go spend a bunch of money on stuff? And of course, we believed everything that we knew to be true. My wife was adopted as a baby. My best friend of 30 years has adopted two children. And so we decided that we would take the money and we would start a nonprofit. And so the Hope Effect was born. The Hope Effect, we've been around for 8 years now, and our goal is to change the way the world cares for orphans. We've had decades worth of research that orphanages, like we think of, four walls and a whole bunch of kids and a few adults coming in and out, that it's actually pretty harmful for kids, better than living on the streets, but brains just don't develop and they fall behind in every stage of human development when you grow up in an institution rather than inside a family, which is God's design. So the Hope Effect works in developing nations that still use institutional orphanages, and we work to help get orphan children out of orphanages and into families where they can receive the attention and affection that they deserve. There's 90 million orphan children in the world, and less than 1% will ever get adopted. And,
Wow.
so how we care for the rest matters quite a bit, and that's the work that we've been doing.
Wow, what an amazing story, and I think a testament to, we're gonna live this out. This is what we're telling people, and it's just a fabulous story. I hope people again relate to this because it's something that we struggle, and I don't even think we realize we struggle that we're so overwhelmed and consumed. I don't think we relate it yet to just there's just so much going on and so much clutter both in our mind, in our homes, as you mentioned, in our cars. We just have stuff coming at us all the time.
I don't think I don't think most of us realize how much of a burden our possessions have become
No.
until we begin to remove them. And as we do, we start to free up more time and money And we ever thought that the New York Times recently called the modern American generation the most tired, hurried, stressed, rushed generation of all time. And no doubt, I think it's because we just own more stuff than any generation has ever owned. Never in human history have human beings owned as much stuff as we do now. And yet we're not content. We want more, when in reality, I think the answer is less.
Yep. The answer is less. It's also in Jesus. And I, again, just thank you so much for sharing your testimony, your faith journey. It's going to be exciting to see this continue, I think, to expand, because this message is so important and needs to get out to more people. Where's the best place? Again, you're on YouTube, Facebook, a website. What do you like to tell people kind of the best way to keep up and really be encouraged every day? That's what I love about what you're
Yeah.
doing, is you help to get people motivated every day.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. We just, the messaging is so much to buy more that a voice telling us to buy less is helpful. Becomingminimalist.com is home base for me. I am involved in a lot of different places, but everything seems to run from that headquarters. So I would send people there. Hopeeffect.com for the Hope Effect, for that nonprofit, to find out the work that we're doing. But becomingminimalist.com is home base for my writing on minimalism.
All right. I will be following it. Thank you so much, Joshua.
Thank you. It's wonderful.